And if we take a look at the scene that we created within View directly in Lightwave, we can notice there are some problems. Mainly, the resolution of this terrain is very low, once again, because that is a procedural terrain, which is going to show up a little bit differently. The trees are all in the correct places, but because of the fact that the terrain isn't covering up a lot of them, we really can't see exactly where the details are. But since we're going to be using this terrain as a collision object, we actually need to make some modifications anyway. Now, we cannot use the view scene itself as a collision object. We will not be able to incorporate that with dynamics. So what we need to do is create another copy of this terrain to bring in to use as the collision, and also as a way to reference exactly where the detail in the terrain is. So even though we can't use this as a collision, we really wouldn't be able to anyway because of the low amount of resolution. I'm going to go to our options, and we can see that detailed preview is on, as I was talking about before. Right now, the main thing is our scale ratio is not set correctly. So I'm going to bring this up to 10 and click OK. And now we can zoom out a little, and we can see it looks a lot more to scale. And it's going to be a lot easier to modify our particles and hypervoxels if everything is matched up correctly. Of course, our terrain itself was not created specifically to the best amount of scale per meter. So if we take a look at our grid, which is currently 1 meter, really overall the size doesn't match up correctly. So that's in one way where we can actually take our scale ratio and bring that down if we needed to make that a little bit larger, and that way our overall scene will be easier to modify. We'll bring this to 6 now, and now we've got that 1 meter. And of course at this point, since we're going the opposite direction, it's shrinking everything down. Go ahead and bring that up a little bit higher to 20, click OK. Go ahead and zoom out. And now we see something a little bit better to scale. And we can change our grid size to view the scene a little bit easier just by using the right and left bracket keys. And now I can change that scale ratio if I need to a little bit more. But basically we're done with the view scene itself and designing it. We just need to get that terrain into Lightwave. So we're going to switch back to the view interface. And what I want to do is take our procedural terrain and make sure it is selected and highlighted. We can right mouse click, go to Edit Object. And now what we want to do is export our terrain. Now currently this is a procedural which cannot be exported. So what we need to do is actually convert this to a standard terrain first, but also make sure that we have enough detail and geometry in order to get a really decent polygon size, depending on how much we really want to interact with those particles. Now right now the preview we see within View looks like a really good polygon amount, but that could be quite high, and we might also need to modify the terrain object we're exporting to delete some of the areas so that we don't have too much geometry, really depending on the overall size of the scene. So before I go ahead and export this, rather than screwing up our current procedural terrain, which we still obviously want in the scene, I'm going to make a copy. So I'm going to select our procedural terrain, copy and paste it, and now we have a duplicate that we can right mouse click on and go to Edit Object, and now we can modify this copy rather than the original, so we're not removing the terrain from the scene, and we don't have to worry about losing any detail or screwing anything up. So what we want to do first, before we convert this to a standard terrain, we need to increase our resolution. Now right now what we can see with 256 by 256 pixels, there's really not a whole lot of definition, and once this becomes a standard terrain, it is going to use what we are currently looking at to create that terrain. So we need to increase not just our view, but also sort of the background layer that we have to create this terrain. And it looks like 1024 by 1024 should be good, so we can go ahead to our options in the upper left, terrain options, and change this to standard. And it's going to convert everything that we have as a procedural directly to a standard terrain. So now all of that definition is completely saved within a format of black and white, white being the highest and black being the lowest points. And if we take a look at the picture, we can actually see that picture that was created based on that procedural. So now we can go to Export Terrain. We're going to take a look at our options. Now, one thing we don't want to do is export material maps, because we won't need to do that at all. All we need is the actual geometry of the object. And we certainly don't need to have this at the highest resolution, because of course if we take a look at the number of polygons, that's going to bring us up to over 2 million, which is way too much, and especially for what we're going to be using it for. So let's bring this down to under 50,000 for sure, and we're going to bring this to around 32. And it might vary up and down on the exact polygon amount, but that should be good. And actually, I can go ahead and increase that a little bit more, because we are going to be deleting the areas around our terrain and the parts we're not really viewing, because we won't need them as a collision. And now we can select our file type, and we can go ahead and change this to an LWO object, and that way we can immediately export into Lightwave without having to do any conversions, although we can easily use the 3DS format and anything else, especially if you're using xStream with other programs than just Lightwave. You can use any of the global amounts and all of these different available options, at least as the object files. There's also a whole lot of options that we have specifically for images, and there's ways to export a lot of the different maps we have, and that's where those other options come in. But let's stick with that right now at the 58, and we can go ahead and export that and save it out. And now that we have our terrain saved, we can go ahead and load this in directly to layout, and then we'll switch to modeler and make those modifications as needed. So let's go ahead and add in this object. And now this object isn't going to be sized correctly, so we will have to make a couple of modifications to that. And also because our scale ratio is turned off a bit. If we go to our options and change our scale ratio down to 10 and click OK, which is the normal value, we can also see that the overall scale is currently different. And that just has to do with the way that these objects are exported. So we will need to make an overall size change, which we can go ahead and do by selecting our object, which I have called Terrain Valley. We'll move to our scale option, and we just want to move this down. And actually, if I undo that, gotta make sure I'm on the global scale, or the scale that is going to scale down all of our axes. And now we can tell this is a really high polygon amount, and it does take a little bit of time to kind of scale that down. Basically, we just need to move in that amount a little, and then we're going to take a look and see how well that matches up to our terrain underneath. And basically what we can do is look at the edges and where they're both cut off, and just sort of match that up, and that'll be extremely close to what we need, and definitely more than enough. So I'm going to change this to our top view, just so we can see a little bit better, and then we can scale that to reach and just line up around the edges. And of course, the program will be a lot more responsive once I'm able to remove the polygons I don't need. And plus there's a little bit of a system lag once again, mainly because of the fact that I'm recording everything that I am doing. So that is a little bit of a strain on the overall process. So now we have that scaled up, and pretty much fit in correctly. We also have to take a look at the vertical size and well, more of the position really. But I do want to just switch over to Modeler and remove those areas that we don't need, and that way we don't have to work with such a large object. What we could also do is maybe even turn down the overall polygon value and the amount, because really with using it as a collision object, we may not want to have so many polygons, and we could always reduce that total amount. So we can take a look, but sometimes it is nice to have that higher polygon value available, and either way we'd be able to use this to more of it even as a display within Lightwave to see the actual shape of the terrain if we wanted to. So we'll take a look at this object, switching to our 4 viewport mode. And I'll just hit A on the keyboard to frame this, and now we can tell that there are a lot of polygons. If we hit W on the keyboard, it'll bring up our statistics. And even though Lightwave had said, or sorry, View had said that it would really only be about 50,000 polygons, we ended up with an amount well over 1 million, which is very, very high and a little bit too much. And because of that, there's a lot of unresponsiveness overall. But let's go ahead and switch back to Lightwave, and we can still use this area that we want mainly for the display, but we're definitely not going to be using this object as a collision object just because of how many polygons there are. And I've just gone ahead and deleted the polygons in the areas we really didn't need to have them, and we can still just go along the edges and sort of trim some of those out. And now we're going to have a much lower amount, and we can actually see once we frame it, we start to see the polygons again rather than a big white blur, although most of the areas still kind of look like that. And if I hit W, we can see that we're under 500,000 polygons now. So this is definitely not something we want to use for collision, but we can use it for visual reference, and that'll work out really well. So we can switch back over into layout, and now if we take a look in the camera view, we'll be able to start to see the geometry, although we do have that view scene blending in the background. But we can easily change that by going to the scene editor and then changing our view and our Opengl selections of the view scene. If I change this to wireframe, now we'll still see our instances because those always show up, but our terrain itself has been reduced to a wireframe where we really can't see it anymore, so that works out quite well. And then we can make other modifications in there as well if we wanted to change that to maybe vertices. But of course that's going to look exactly the same between the two. Just making sure that you're not using bounding box. But we'll go back into our perspective view, and now we can really see just the area we want to work on. And if we take a look, we can tell that the overall shape seems to be set up correctly as far as looking at the vertical size, because if you remember, we did stretch that terrain just a little bit, although the export did seem to compensate for that. So everything does seem to look alright. We can take a look between the different programs just to make sure that it does look correct. And everything seems to be lining up correctly. So we should be able to go from there. But this is a really nice reference now. We just want to make sure we turn this off from our render. So we can select Objects, Terrain Valley, Properties. We're going to go to Render, and Object Dissolve is going to be set to 100%. We're also going to turn off Self Shadow, Cast Shadow, Receive Shadow. But one thing you might notice is that it's going to disappear from our scene. if it is not selected. And we can see we lose that overall value. So that might be something you want to do just before you're about to render, rather than the whole time you're viewing the scene. So we'll leave that on right now by going back into the properties and turning off the object dissolve. And now technically what you could do is go to the surface editor. Right now we just have a default surface on there. And you could increase the transparency, but the only problem is if you have other transparent object in the scene, you will definitely need to ray trace transparency, and the fact that this object is transparent and still showing up in the render, it could take a lot longer to render frames, and you might run into some other problems. But we do want to go back into xStream now, and we need to export an entirely different terrain, one that is much lower resolution. So we can go to our view interface, and I had deleted our copy, so I'm going to need to make a new one. Control C, Control V to copy paste. Right mouse click and edit object. And I think one way to definitely keep that resolution down is if we just keep the 256 by 256, because even though it looks really polygonal, it's not a lot of detail, it should give us enough definition with a low poly model to get exactly what we want. So 256 by 256, change that to a standard terrain, and then we can let that image render to the picture value, which goes really quickly at the lower resolutions. And now we can click OK, just to make sure that is set. And we're going to take a look at the resolution, and it looks like there is a little bit of an offset, which might have been caused by using that lower resolution. So maybe we should turn it up to 512 just to get some of those peaks in there. So we'll just go ahead and do that again, copy and paste our procedural terrain, open it up, 512 by 512, convert that to a standard terrain, click OK, and we still have a little bit of that overall lower distortion, but it should be fine, because if you take a look in the terrain editor, it does look like it's detailed more than enough. So we'll go to our export terrain, and we're going to bring our mesh resolution all the way down to a really low value, because it's not always going to be completely accurate. It's an estimate, and depending on what kind of a terrain you're working on, that estimate might be off. Like we saw before, where it's supposed to be 50,000 polygons, and we ended up with well over 1 million. So we'll use a very low export right now, and then we can go ahead and just export this out, making sure we're not using the material maps because we do not need them. And I want to make sure I delete that terrain so it's not interfering in the scene. We'll go back into Lightwave, and I'm just going to go ahead and save this really quick. And you always want to make sure that you're saving constantly. And right now I have the incorporate view scene into the Lightwave scene file turned on, so that way they both save together. I can just open it up in Lightwave. If you're going to be switching between different applications, then you definitely want to save them separately. But one thing you notice is that every time you save within Lightwave, your ecosystem will disappear. Now if we go back to view, we can see that it will also disappear from our render, but it is still in the scene. If I just go ahead and click like we did before to reset that OpenGL view, then those trees will come back. Although sometimes if you have populated ecosystems, you may have to repopulate, but that doesn't happen very often. And usually most of the time you can just click right there and it'll reset the ecosystem, and then if we go back into Lightwave, it'll show up again. So now we need to load in that collision object that we just saved out. So go to Objects and just load that in. And now we can see that very large terrain in there, which will need to be modified just like the other one. We can also see that it is a fairly large amount of polygons, even though we had the lower level set. So we may once again need to go and export something even a little bit lower. But overall that should be good. One thing we can do now is take our object and take a look at the scale options from our last one and just copy that over. And we can see that we had it down to 0.2 on all axes. So we can go to our low poly mode and just go ahead and change that scale to match. And now it's going to line itself up perfectly with the other one. And we just need to go into Modeler and then remove that area and only use what we're going to be needing for our collision. So we'll go into Modeler, and we can change and save our modified valley. And we also want to load in our new low poly model, which might not be that low poly. But we can take a look, hit W on the keyboard, and we can see that we are at a little over 500,000 polygons. So once we remove that area, it should be a little bit better. But we may need to go and just bring it all the way down to the lowest setting. And we can also use some of Lightwave's tools as well to reduce that polygon level. So there's a lot of tools available for that. But first let's go ahead and select polygons. And I'm just going to remove this outer area. And once that's selected, we can hit delete. Hit W again, we can see we're down to under 200,000, which is definitely much better. We can remove some of these other polys. And let's take a look at this in layout. And it's a little difficult to tell exactly where that is showing up, just because we have our other object, which we might not need if this low poly is not so low poly. So let's go into the objects panel for our higher resolution terrain. Increase the object dissolve to 100% so that it's disappearing from our scene. We're going to go to our low poly version, and we can take a look and see which areas need to be removed. And it looks like that back area and a little bit around the side, we could still trim that out a bit. So let's go ahead and select those polygons and remove those. And go along the side, a little more in the back. And then we can switch over to layout just to verify the area we're removing. And that's always a good idea, just to kind of switch back and forth if you're going to be pretty much decimating an object. And that looks pretty good. We just have that specific area we need to work on. Go to W, and we can see we have 122,000, which is way too high for this. So what we will need to do is really reduce the overall polygon count, because this is going to be hard to work with all of our collision objects and our particles. It will take a very long time to calculate the collision with something this detailed. So we're going to go to the Reduce tab, and we are using the Studio Production interface. If you go to Edit, Menu Layout, under Presets we are in Studio Production Style. And that way we have this Reduce tab available, and we're going to use Reduce Polys Plus. We can go ahead and click on that, and this is really easy to set up. Right now we can see the goal is basically how many polys do we want to have, and this is a reduction based on percentage. So 0.5 is going to be 50%, and that would cut our polygons in half. We want to go much lower than that. So let's go ahead and start out with 0.1, and we can click OK. And that'll go ahead and remove all the polygons we don't need. And now we can see we have a much lower resolution mesh. I'm going to change this from weight shade to texture so we can see that a little bit better. And if we hit W on the keyboard, we can see we're down to 12,000 polygons, which is a way better value to be working with for a collision object. You can also see that we're working completely now with triangles and 3-point polys, and that is a really great way using this reduced polygons with terrain to work with video game terrains. So if you've created a really cool terrain in View and you want to bring it into Lightwave and export it using the Reduce Polys Plus and bringing it to a very low value, of course we would have to probably do it again depending on the overall size of the terrain, but you can get a lot of your details and you won't really have to worry about losing them by using this tool, because you get some great 3-point polygons out of it and just fantastic for game models, and that'll work really well if you're going to be doing terrains for that. But we can go ahead and reduce this a little bit more if we wanted, because this might be a little too high. And if you take a look, we also have the old version still loaded in our first layer. So it's really nice. It'll just create a copy and bring it into another layer, and that way we don't lose that original geometry. Go back to Reduce Polys Plus, and I'd say we want at least half of this, but let's bring it down to 0.45, and let's do 45%, and click OK, and we can reduce that even more. Hit W on the keyboard, and now you can see we're down to 5,500 polys, which is extremely manageable and a much better way to work with it. So we can go to our previous two sections and other polygon amounts and just go ahead and delete those. And I'll just go ahead and cut from our first layer and paste, or cut from our third layer and paste in our first layer. And one of the reasons I didn't use our really high polygon model to reduce is because sometimes reducing polys can take a really long time depending on the overall amount, and when you're working with 1,000,000, it would take kind of a long time to process that. So if you just re-export, it's usually much quicker to bring in a little bit of a lower poly, even if it's only half, and then you can use the reduced polys from there, and it works much better. We can go ahead and save this and just make sure both of those are saved out. Switch back over to Layout, and now we can see the new model in there. And whether or not that low poly version is enough to really see the scene is kind of up to you. Really, it depends on how much you need to see of the scene. But I do want to take that other object and just remove our object dissolve, bring that down to 0, and that way we can see all of those nice details, even though they are being blended in with our collision object. But in that case, we can take our low poly, increase the object dissolve, because we don't need to see a shaded version of that, at least as much. And now we can see all of our nice terrain areas back, and that's really helpful if you're going to be keyframing the camera directly within Lightwave and not using View, because you don't have to worry about everything being in different positions. And right now we can take a look and see we have a couple of errors, and mainly it's an Opengl display error. If you take a look at our low poly model, a lot of that is just some of the areas that haven't been deleted yet. So what we can do is move over into Modeler and just remove some more polys. Select polygons. I'm going to remove that top and the side parts, because we really hadn't refined it as much as we should have. And just to verify that is in a good position, I'm going to switch to position, and we can pull that up, and now we can see we do have more than enough to work with. So I'll undo that move that we did, and now we can start working on turning that into a collision object, and then bringing those particles through this little valley.